Let's be honest, most men drift. We wake up, we scroll, we work, and then we just rinse and repeat. And we know we're softer than we should be. That's why I built the 31-day resilience reset. This is not a devotional. It is a field manual for men ready to stop drifting and start fighting back. So for 31 days, you'll train your spirit, mind, and body with scripture, prayer, and daily challenges that forge real resilience. Go to www.Undaunted.Life/31 days to download this resource for free. That's Undaunted.Life/31 days. Start your reset today. This is Undaunted Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. Jay Risner, welcome back to the table. We're technically not doing a forging table right now, but I will say the moment you knocked on the door, I had an immediate rush of anxiety because it was like whenever the principal called the classroom and they asked for Kyle Thompson to come down. It was never like to give me an award for academic excellence or anything like that. And so it kind of felt like maybe the elders got together, and I mean, even though I invited you at a specific time and that's when you showed up, it was like I kind of felt like I was in trouble. So what's going on here?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe there is something. What's down deep there that we need to get into?
See, that's a reverse psychology thing that I don't appreciate very much because I have admitted to things that I did wrong when I wasn't being accused of that thing before because of the guilty conscience. I don't have anything right now, but there are times when people bring things up to me where I'm just like, okay.
Well, I assure you, I come in peace. This is going to be a great time.
Okay. Yeah. I'm hoping we have a good time. And you're already doing a better job than Ryan Horn than to actually talking into the mic. Cause that guy will just trail off into the ether and all kinds of things. Like, I don't know why he's still around. He's kind of like that dog that you find in the country and then like you bring him to your house and he just kind of hangs around the barn. But like eventually you're just like, is this thing ever going to move on? And the guy just won't. He's just, he's kind of sticky.
He's just that, but he's that lovable too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it.
He needs a little bit more of the lovable part of his life. But no, one of the main reasons that I wanted to kind of bring you in is because, we had Mark Hitchcock on earlier this year. Everybody kind of, they really enjoyed that conversation, kind of getting into his brain. Obviously, the extemporaneous speaking thing, like seeing him in a non-sermon setting was like odd. But our audience has already seen you in a non-sermon setting. Did I make you wear like a Santa hat or something like that?
Yeah, we ate Little Debbie's.
Yeah,
it was a thing.
Don't worry, I don't have any of those. I'm not
Smelling salts were a part of that.
I do have those.
I'm good.
You're hard pass?
I'm
okay.
good, yep.
But wanted to kind of get to know your background a little bit more. We talked about that a little bit on the forging table. And then there's some really interesting things that are coming up for Faith Bible, especially in this era of kind of MIC churches where it's like, okay, we're just going to, keep buying real estate with cash and, taking advantage of the tax exempt status. And we're going to keep building these churches, keep building these screens and all that type of thing. And y'all are kind of going a different route. And you did talk about this a little bit on the forging table, but like becoming a pastor isn't, I don't really run into too many people that, ever since I was a little boy, I always knew I would be a pastor, unless it's like my buddy Josh Howerton, whose dad was a pastor. Some of these other people are like, well, actually, yeah, like watching my dad travel and preach the gospel or do whatever, I just knew that's what I wanted to do. But that wasn't really your route. And so like bit of a circuitous route to get you into pastoring. And so I'm just wondering, like, let's just start there and then we'll build out.
Yeah, great question. I did not see myself growing up being a pastor. Didn't aspire to it. Didn't really grow up in church. So we were, the old CEO Christian family, went to church on Christmas, went to church on Easter. So we sort of acknowledged God. We celebrated the major holidays, but church attendance, that commitment really wasn't there. Didn't have prayer at meals, didn't have family discipleship type stuff going on. And so I was always sort of a visitor at church is the way I always felt. I did go with friends here and there and on occasion. But again, you're always a guest. And so I think because of that, I didn't ever see myself as tracking toward ministry per se. But I came to, and I think maybe we share this in common, I came to faith in Christ through the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Am I
No, I was I did FCA stuff.
Okay.
It may have been because I posted that picture of me praying at an FCA event
maybe that
when
is
I
right.
had those ridiculous sideburns in high school, but we didn't have to bring that up. So nice, roundabout way to get there. But
yeah. We need to go back and look at that. Maybe you can flash that up in the editing.
We will not. Landon, don't do it.
So yeah, 8th grade, I come into Owasso Junior High School, grew up in Owasso, Oklahoma. All my growing up years were there. I come into junior high early one morning, just got off the bus. My best friend in life greets me and says, "Hey, we're going to go to FCA." And I was like, I don't know what that is.
Hmm.
And he said, well, it's down the hall in the biology room. And sure enough, all my friends were down there. All the cheerleaders were down there. All my teammates were down there. So let's go down there. Let's make that happen. So went down there, fall of my 8th grade year, heard the gospel for the first time. Didn't really think it was for me. Kind of always felt like, oh, I'm a Christian. I'm only a fool doesn't believe in God, right? I believe in God, and but had never really heard the gospel in the way that it was explained that morning. So that led to a string of Tuesday mornings through my 8th grade year, where I'd go to FCA, and Doc Blevins, the FCA sponsor who was leading it at our junior high and later on in our high school, he was just sharing the gospel with our student body every Tuesday morning. And so it took a year. So my 9th grade year, some things had happened in my family life that maybe woke me up to just the realities of death and heaven and hell. And anyway, fall of my freshman year, at actually an evening FCA event at a friend's house, I just went to Doc after the message and I said, man, I need Christ to be my savior. And so he prayed with me, and there was a marked change at that time. I remember started asking my parents to take me back to church, so they would take me to the little Presbyterian church that we would go to on Christmas and Easter. Didn't have a youth ministry. I was showing up by myself. The church body was like, "Hey, we know who you are, but what are you doing here? We don't really have anything for you here." And so started going to church with a friend at another church in town, started getting kind of some entry-level discipleship and going to camps and retreats and all that kind of stuff. But again, my whole family didn't go there. So I was more of a guest, a visitor. I did get baptized there. And there were some really good things about that whole experience. But FCA was kind of this piece of my early discipleship. And then as I got into college, came here to UCO, there wasn't an FCA chapter. So me and a football player named Chris Cook, who's actually an Edmond police officer now, he and I just tried to start building an FCA group. And there were weeks where we'd have 2 people. There were weeks we'd have 20 people. There would be weeks we had no people. And it was the most unstrategic sort of ministry going on. All we were doing was inviting our friends and the athletes in the school to come and hear the gospel. And they were coming and they were hearing, and some were responding. But there was no real strategic discipleship piece to it at all. I think about what student mobilization, some of these other ministries do now. We didn't have any of that going on. But my heart was in it. And it was through that experience. I was studying business, didn't have a great interest in business, just needed to get a degree, I needed to do something with the education I was getting. But my passion was in this ministry area. I was working camps in the summer, and I was doing college retreats and different things. And so I remember just yielding my heart to God. I actually have a journal entry that outlines just me spilling my heart out to God my senior year, and just saying, whatever you want me to do, God, I'll do. If you want me to go sell insurance, I'll do that. If you want me to, move back home, if you want me to coach and teach, or I'll just, whatever you want me to do. If you want me to do ministry, I'm just yielded. And early spring of that same year, that senior year, a guy named Chuck Bowman gave me a call, and Chuck still lives in Edmond. He's kind of the godfather of Oklahoma FCA, or really national FCA in many respects. And so Chuck called and invited me out to his office out east of Edmond, and just said, "Hey, we want you to come on staff with FCA." And I was like, man, that is an answer to prayer. Chuck, that's exactly what I want to do. And I thought that's kind of the way God had wired me. Again, always feeling like a little bit of an outsider at church, come to faith in Christ through FCA, looking at youth pastors going, man, those guys are kind of dorky. I don't want to be a youth pastor. But this FCA thing, this sort of fits. And so I kind of jumped through those hoops, filled out applications, and just kind of sat and waited. Like, okay, this opening is supposed to be in the fall, so I've got some time to kill. And I was dating a girl who would later become my wife. I was dating Mandy at the time. And Mandy grew up in Enid, Oklahoma. And she was going back to Enid for the summer. And I wanted to be with her. I wanted to hang out with her and pursue the relationship and continue to get to know her better. And at her Southern Baptist church that she grew up in, there was like a youth summer intern program. And so I just put my name in the hat for that. And they invited me to come and serve for the summer. And my intention was to go to Enid for 3 months. I ended up staying for almost 6 years. So in that summer, kind of fell in love with local church ministry and what it was about. The church was in a place where they needed some help in the youth ministry area. And so the summer turned into a fall. And during that fall season, two things happened. One, I heard back from FCA and they said, hey, the position we thought was going to open, the guy's re-signing on. He's not going to leave staff. But do you want to go to Wyoming? And I was like, okay. I'd never been to Wyoming. And I had this girl that I'm pursuing and I want to continue to pursue. And I had this church that's saying, hey, why don't you stick around and do ministry here? And so I just stayed put, stayed in church, or at least in the church ministry lane, I should say. Got engaged to my wife. We got married a few months later. And that church, which was pretty sizable, at least one of the largest churches in Northwest Oklahoma, in that same period of time, they said, hey, we're going to reposition the youth pastor into a different role, the role he was doing before. We want you to become the student pastor. And so I was 22 years old, had no training, didn't really grow up in church, didn't know the Bible all that well, had a heart for it, had a passion for it, really wanted to do it, but I had no business getting that job. But the church was gracious with me, and certainly God was too, and didn't make too many mistakes that would destroy my life or anybody else's. And that's how I ended up in pastoral ministry, just through open doors and opportunities and following wherever God led.
Okay, so one thing that I'm interested in as it pertains to that is, okay, because some people would say, hey, you never should have got that job because you were not trained, you were not equipped for that. But if we go and look at, the book of Acts, or we go look at any of these early church people, none of them were equipped because it wasn't a thing yet, right? There wasn't Bible study degrees and
Right.
there was stuff when it pertained to the Torah and the prophets and all those types of things. And so there's that aspect of it. But I hear so often now, I hear this from my buddies that are, have big churches or big platforms or have written a lot of, best-selling books or whatever. They'll run into these people that, man, I want to be in ministry. And what they're actually saying is, I want to be on stage with a microphone and I want all the lights down, but the only lights to be on me. I want to say really smart things and make people laugh and get people saved. I want to write books. I want to do cool podcasts. I want to do interviews. And I want to be the center of attention. And so it doesn't sound like from the beginning that you had an aspiration that, hey, this is going to go somewhere. It's going to increase the profile. I'm going to be, a lead elder or a senior pastor someday. It was just like, what can I do to serve this local body? And again, you've been around a bunch of Christian and Christianese people. What's your read of that? Because it's so hard to surmise from the outside looking in whether or not someone's heart is pure. And whether because it's one thing to be like, oh, I'll take out the trash. And that's your thing. Oh, I took out the trash and now I'm the senior pastor. Okay, there's some cool stories like that. But for other people, it's no, everything is about the next angle and getting to the next place. It's not about serving the sheep. It's about making sure, they have a bigger platform as a shepherd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the context of the late 90s is a little bit different than, 2026, the opportunities and channels of being platformed were a little bit smaller back in the day. You couldn't really get your name, face, voice out there in the way that you can now with social media and everything else. But interesting, one other little part of my story, I remember my senior year in high school trying to sort out what I wanted to do. And the only reason I ended up at going to UCO is I had a guy a year ahead of me who was playing golf there. He and I were friends. And I didn't know where I wanted to go to school. And, my world was pretty small. We didn't travel a lot as a family. And I think grew up in the Wausau area, which is Tulsa proper. And I think I'd been to Oklahoma City twice in my growing up years, just for different sporting events or whatever. And so didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had this guy said, hey, I'm playing golf here. I really like Edmond. You should look into it. And so went to my high school counselor or whatever. What do you know about Edmond and Central Oklahoma? She handed me some scholarship stuff and an application, and I filled it all out, and it all worked out. And so that's where I ended up going. Ironically, my buddy Greg, who was playing golf, he ended up leaving.
Yeah. So, thanks, Greg.
Yeah. So ended up just kind of there by myself. But then a guy that I was very close to in high school, teammate, he ended up at UCO, and we roomed together for my remaining 3 years. But in that decision process as a high school kid, my mother said to me, I think you should be a minister.
How old would you have been?
I was 17.
Okay.
And so that didn't make a huge impression on me in the moment. But it was kind of validating as I moved along. Like, mom kind of knows best. Like, she saw something. There was something there that compelled her to say that. And I think God used that affirmation in a cool way. But to your original question, I think the funny thing about pastoral ministry, now not necessarily youth ministry, maybe at a lower level, but and this is an overused term in this day and age, and so I don't want to abuse it, but I think the narcissist can be very drawn to pastoral ministry.
Oh yeah.
And I think it has a way of feeding, the supply that a person with, that personality it deals with. And so to your point, yes, there are a lot of guys that just want the platform. They just want the microphone. They just want to be the center of attention. They want it to be about them. I didn't really have that going on. I do think I loved seeing kids who didn't have a relationship with God, maybe were far from Him, didn't have much of a connection to church, get it. And that just thrilled me. And so as I got into youth ministry, I was not at a rough church. I was never at a rough church or a place where, the demographics, the context was super, super challenging. It was always a mix of Christian school kids and public school kids. And then when I came to Faith Bible, some homeschool kids as well. But as you well know, there are kids who grow up in church who are as far from God
Oh yeah.
as anybody.
Yeah, they went to Christian school. They went to Awana. They memorized verses.
And they don't get the gospel.
Yeah.
And they think it's about their performance, and they think it's about certain sets of rules that they're keeping, and they're really proud of their ability to keep those rules. And so even seeing those kids get sort of torn down and just in awe of who Jesus is and what He's done for them, that just thrilled me early on and continued to kind of empower and thrill me all along the way. Was never afraid of the platform, though. It was never, when I say that, like getting up in front of people and speaking or sharing. And so I think that helped serve me well. But I also at the same time, I wasn't hungry for it. It wasn't one of those things that, okay, if I could just get there, if I could just get to that size church or to that size group, then I'd really arrived. I think people have that mentality. They never really get satisfied. So,
well, and so going back to the whole like narcissism thing, like there's some sociopathy there, some psychopathy. And I remember when Mark was here, he said something, and I'd said it on the show as well, but even, people at our church, because, our church is, pretty down the middle. I mean, there's depravity, all kinds of flavors. Ours is just dressed up with, nice SUVs and perfect hair, but like in some cases. But like when Mark said that there are pastors out there that aren't even Christians, like I could hear the audible gasp in the future of people listening to Mark say that, and almost just, how dare you?
Mm-hmm.
How dare you judge somebody that is a pastor and blah, 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 blah. But it's like, guys, that is not a stretch of the imagination at all. Because we talk about how, this person was a faithful pastor, a faithful person. And then, they just kind of got caught up with the wrong crowd. They had an affair and they've denounced their faith. They've deconstructed and now they're on Oprah. Like whatever the thing was, like if Jesus could not lose one of His sheep, then the only conclusion is that person was never a believer. They were leveraging knowledge about the Bible and, a attractive personality or an attractive face and body in order to gain themselves acclaim, to control other people, to be the center of attention. And so like, there are a lot of verses that are terrifying in the Bible if you read it closely, but it's like, depart from me for I never knew you. And they're like, no, look at all this stuff. Look at the list. Like I look at all these things I've done. And so for you, I wonder if something like that is scary to you as well, because a really good indication that you are actually a Christian is where if you're a little bit worried about your salvation, like wanting to make sure, like, is this really true? Because if you're, on the other side of the Romans 1 equation, like you don't really care. It doesn't really matter to you. But I'm just wondering what your read is of that, because again, some people think just because you have pastor on your placard outside your office or on your business card that, you're automatically in, and also you are equipped to be able to lead others to be in the same crew as you.
Yeah. To your first, or not your first point, but the point you made about concern over your salvation, I think is a sign that you are in fact saved. One way of saying it is, a sense of his absence is a sign of his presence.
Okay.
So if there's a longing there, you wouldn't be longing if you weren't being pursued. And so, that's kind of a separate issue from the core of the question. But, a guy who wrote on this really before his time, essentially, Sinclair Lewis wrote a book called Elmer Gantry. I commend it to you. And it's the story of a kind of larger than life personality, college jock who basically gets called into the ministry, and he starts doing these evangelistic revival type crusade things. And he does it because he's talented. He's got a big personality. He's good at it, but he's awful. He's a depraved man.
Mm.
And so the book is this unfolding of his depravity alongside of his quote unquote ministry. And so what Sinclair Lewis was projecting there in the 20s, in I think the setting is rural Kansas, we have in high definition now, I think all over the place in the church. And so I do think there are example after example of guys who lack the character development to take the platforms that they've been given. When a guy gets that much influence, when he gets that much real or imagined power, however you want to talk about it, but certainly when he can control people, if his character isn't high, then there's going to be destruction in the wake. And I mean, we could sit here and make a list and name the names, but no need to.
Hey guys, real quick. I know a lot of you train for very specific things. So maybe you've got a mud race coming up, a mountain hunt, a 5K, or maybe you just want to keep up with your kids, or you just don't want to let the old man in. But for a lot of you guys, whether you're working out at the Globo gym or even in your garage gym, you get there and you just don't know exactly what to do. And so you just kind of settle for the same old workout routine, maybe some bench press, bicep curls, a walk on the treadmill, and you're not really getting the most out of your workout plan. And I want you guys to stop wasting time at the gym. No more settling. It's time for you guys to get a guide to help you reach your fitness goals. And that's why I want to remind you about my good friends at Mountain Tough. Mountain Tough is a fitness and mental toughness app developed by military special operators and mountain hunters that's becoming a global movement for building mentally tough athletes on and off the mountain. Mountain Tough is a native app ready to be downloaded on all platforms, so that includes iPhone, Android, Apple TV, Roku, and there's more. Once you sign up and download the app or access the website, you immediately have access to hundreds of exercise programs and literally thousands of workout videos. Thousands. So that includes structured hybrid strength and endurance programs, daily workouts, the full exercise library, mental toughness training, the Mountain Tough community, and accountability. And you can use it all on the go, online or offline, no matter where you decide to train. So if you're just getting started, that's great. They have programs for beginners. If you have minimal or no gear where you train, that's not a factor. They have minimal gear and body weight programs. And guys, if you're wanting to get into or maintain elite level fitness, they've got you covered with programs for top tier athletes too. And for a limited time, Mountain Tough is extending Undaunted Lifers like you an incredible offer. Go to mountaintough.com. That's MTNtough.com and enter the code Kyle when you sign up for a monthly plan to receive your first month free after your 14-day trial. So that's 6 weeks free to make sure this is for you. I'm sure it will be. That is 6 weeks free on the best-in-class physical and mental training app in the world. So stop wasting time. It's time to get real fitness results. Let my friends at Mountain Tough guide the way. Again, go to MTNtough. That's mountaintough.com. Promo code Kyle. Pointing that's one of the things that I point out on the show, and that gives people a little bit of a tummy ache. They're like, because what they want me to say is they want me to describe everything that someone did, but they just don't want me to say their name. And I'm just like, you knew I was talking about, like, so I said the name so that everybody was on the same page. And why exactly do you want me to pull cover for Robert Morris? Why exactly? Like a pedophilic rapist? Yeah, I'm sorry. You wanted me to pull cover for this guy so that you feel better, end user. And I just don't really understand that. But it's one thing to go around like these what do they call those super reform guys that are like the theology police? They're always going around looking for everybody. Like their entire reason for existence is to catch a pastor saying something that's slightly off color or a little bit inaccurate whenever they're just speaking extemporaneously. And then they're
The
like,
no name discernment ministry
yeah,
guys.
it's like, we're going to put this up and this person, mark and avoid and all that.
Mhm.
But look, there are people that do need to be marked and avoided. And again, like I understand that my default mechanism is aggression and forthrightness and like, hey, let's point these things out. But I do get very, very concerned when I see even my friends being pulled over towards ministries or towards ministers where it's like there's no there. Like this person is a tremendously gifted speaker, but what they're saying is incredibly nefarious because the nefarious nature of the things that they're saying, Jay, aren't always super overt.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, even go back to the garden when the dragon was talking to Eve in the garden. It wasn't overt. You've got to do this. Go take a bite from the tree. It was, hey, did God really say? And a master deceiver gets you to question in your own mind the things that you know you should do so that it becomes your decision whenever you do or don't do the thing, right? And so and I guess all this comes down, Jay, is like this tremendous lack of discernment that I've seen, since the murder of Charlie Kirk last year. I feel like the mask came off for a lot of people. And, these people that they're educated beyond their wisdom and they'll hear something that a Tucker Carlson or an Ian Carroll or especially in a Candace Owens says, and they take the total amount of claims as evidence. And the same thing goes into ministries. Well, hey, how could this person be that bad, Pastor Jay? Yeah. He's got a huge platform. He has 50,000 people that attend his services. He's been on the New York Times bestseller list multiple times. Hey, he's on television. And I just think for a lot of people and for you as a shepherd, and a lot of your flock listening to this and then, other flock elsewhere listening to this, like kind of help us have some more discernment in these types of people so we don't get romanced by their personalities.
Yeah, I think it's weird because I've never been a layperson.
Yeah.
In my adult life, at least, had some church experience in high school and college, but immediately entering into pastoral ministry and having never been a layperson, I've never had to find a church. I've never had to, the old church shopping term, which I don't love, but I understand it. And so I think people will often find their church based on, okay, did my kids like it? Or, was the coffee good? Were there enough bathrooms? Was it easy to get around? Is
parking.
It convenient? Whatever. There's all these little things, and never ask the question of who are the elders here, and what do the church bylaws look like, and how does the polity work itself out, and are there checks and balances? How is the budget put together? So on and so forth. Because I think when you peel back that layer, that's when you see the nature of a church, the humility of its pastor, and all those things that I think are so valuable and hedge against some of the abuse, spiritual, financial, whatever else that exists in those churches where the pastor is king and what he says goes and everybody bows to him. And there's a strange reverence that sort of takes over in those places for whatever the pastor has to say or whatever his vision or idea might be. And so I would love to see more people, and I love it actually when people come to Faith Bible and they are curious about some of those important things. Because at that point I realize, you're actually going to be a good church member. And you're actually probably not going to leave when your kids don't like it anymore, or when there's something else here that you're not satisfied with. We get a lot of people at Faith from other churches, and they'll say, well, the teaching wasn't deep enough, or the pastor said this thing wrong, or they didn't have this going on for our certain needs. And I always tell them, I'm so glad you're here, but there's going to be something here that is going to disappoint you or bother you at some point. We're not perfect. We're led by imperfect men. We're full of imperfect people. We're looking to the one who is perfect. He's the center of everything we're doing here. We want to be faithful to him, but I do love it when people are curious about the right things. And not that, children's check-in is unimportant, or not that some of those other pieces of the Sunday morning puzzle don't matter. But when people are asking some of the big questions about doctrine and polity and stuff, that's when I realize, okay, their head's in the right place. They understand what they're doing here.
When I even remember you mentioned the church shopping thing, this was years ago. We got to find out when we were actually became members of Faith Bible, because people ask us all the time how long we've been there, and we both just look at each other like we don't know how words work, and it's just like I don't know. So we need to figure that out. But I remember when we were, because we had been at Life Church for 10, 12 years or whatever, and we kind of realized, man, that's about 9 to 11 years too long. We did leadership, we did all the different things, but it hit me one day. I'm like, if I died, I don't know that anyone from the church would be here to check on Kelsey.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be my dudes, right? It'd be my foxhole. They'd be there. And I was like, oh, I don't really know about that. And so we did a little bit of shopping. We tried this church. We tried that church. We popped around to this one that was, put up, in a junior high school. And then this one was like a brick and mortar one and blah, blah. And then we got to the end and we were confused, right? It's like whenever you're going and trying to buy a car and you want it to be the perfect car because you don't want to have to sell it and buy a new one. And then you drive all these different cars and then you're just confused. You're just paralyzed with the decision. And so any, good college educated human beings, we whiteboard this thing, right? And so we had categories that we gave it a score from 0 to 5. And it was, embarrassing to say now, it was preaching style, music, convenience of how we could get there. And there were a few other categories. And she and I each went into each category and gave it a score from 0 to 5. We averaged it out. And there was a dead heat tie. I don't know how this happened, but an exact tie between Life Church and Faith Bible. And Kelsey just looked to me, to her credit, and just said, look, I trust your judgment. This is before we had kids. I trust your judgment. We'll go wherever you see best. And the difference for us became how Faith Bible approaches children's ministry versus Life Church or really any other church, where there was a whole lot of Bible, weren't as concerned about making sure they were entertained and just, kept out of their parents' hair. And so that, made the decision for us. And we grew to love Sunday school. No one calls it anything else other than that. It's clearly a Sunday school, because calling it something else wouldn't make any sense,
Crazy,
right?
yeah.
It'd be the dumbest thing possible. And so the Sunday school, having that at church during that time, our Sunday school class is a little bit big. So we have almost little subgroups that meet, on a monthly basis or something like that. But then I got to a place where guys were like, hey, I live in whereversville, Wyoming, and there's not a lot of churches around here. But what should I be looking for? And what they're really asking me is, do you know of a church in my area? I'm like, bro, I don't know of other churches in my area, in my zip code, that I would say yay or nay to. But I would try to give them hints. I was like, is the sermon 30 seconds of Bible reading and then 44 and a half minutes of personal anecdotes and funny stories?
Mm-hmm.
Or are we expositing the scripture? Are we exegeting versus eisegeting? If they don't know what those mean, that's a great opportunity for them to look that up. Hey, do you see men around? Are the men involved? Are there a lot of women walking through the congregation or walking through the facility with their kids and their husbands gone? Because that's a hint, right? That's a hint that something's off. Mm-hmm. And then, you can get into corporate structures and, elders versus a board of directors, because a lot of people have insulated themselves from accountability. They don't have elders. They have a board of directors with all their pastor buddies from across the country.
Oh, yeah.
And they're not voting. Yeah, so they can't even be voted out of their own leadership position, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's what I've tried to push guys to, because the issue becomes when we start to weight certain things that aren't as important. And I feel like, you mentioned, Christianity and the old church thing in the 90s versus today. I feel like I am just inundated with people, and this has been a major sticking point on my show, Jay, that they will go to a church for the music, right?
Music is carrying a lot of churches. You're exactly right.
The style of music, how good the people are at performing it. And there's almost no regard for, are the lyrics being sung even vaguely biblical? Are they theologically sound at all, or do they just sound good? Do I get whipped up with emotion? And we get to this place where worship becomes a lot of things. It becomes optional. It becomes a spectator sport, not something that you participate in. It's something that you watch and make sure you clap at the end, a la a concert. Mm-hmm. And then, also, it's like, hey, we're supposed to worship in spirit and truth, right? So a little bit more spirit on the worship side, but then there's got to be the truth side. Mm-hmm. And so if you get this TED Talk at the end of the 20-minute super emotional worship service, Like, what is that actually giving you tangibly? You're getting spiritual Skittles, but you're not getting any steak, right? Like
Mhm.
that's going to wear out before you even get out of the parking lot. And so I guess what have you seen? Because you've been in the Christian world,
Mhm.
longer than I have, and you've seen kind of the rise of these ministries where if it weren't for the band, like the ministries wouldn't have a platform, the lead pastor wouldn't have a platform. But and again, this is a huge subject for me, but like I remember first finding out one of these mega churches in our area, the only Christian in the band was the leader.
Oh, wow.
Everyone else was a session musician. They were just a bassist or a keyboard player or a guitarist or a drummer, and they'd get paid $500 a weekend or something like that just to fill in because it's got to sound good, right? Because if we're Christians, we got to make sure what we're putting out there is the best thing possible. And then, there's no regard for the people on stage being examples to
Mhm.
other folks as to no, this is how you should model your life. It's like, no, I'm just getting paid for a sesh kind of a deal. So I know there's a lot in there, but I know you've done some thinking on how worship should be done and what's appropriate.
Yeah, so pretty interesting if I think about my, like, the span of my ministry career, coming into youth ministry in the late 90s, around 2000. That was actually the same time that sort of worship exploded. That coincided with the Passion conferences.
Would this have been
Uh,
like the DC Talk Newsboys? Would it have been that, or was it Michael
uh,
W. Smith? I'm trying to like place it in my brain.
so mid 90s youth ministry was Father Abraham and Spring Up Oh Well, Goosh 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 Goosh. These basically songs with motions.
Okay.
By the end of the decade, 2000, you had you had Matt Redman and you had Charlie Hall, you had Chris Tomlin, you had Louis Giglio's Passion Movement was sort of just emerging. And so worship amongst young people became heartfelt and passionate, and all the motions and things went away, became very much an extension of their devotional life, and obviously did a lot for corporate life as well in the body. And so you can even think about this in terms of the way contemporary Christian music used to exist in the 90s and 2000s, and how that as a genre has basically gone away and yielded itself almost entirely to worship music. Most, probably 90% of I don't listen to a lot of Christian radio or whatever, but most of it now is geared in the direction of worship. And so the rise of that and the churches accommodating, I think, what started in a youth movement, has now put worship at center stage. It is what's driving the attendance of a lot of churches, and so it's 30 minutes of, sometimes 40, maybe even longer, of worship in a black box with all the lights on the stage, and and then a sermon that follows that. I think you've called them TED Talks, but might involve some scripture, but certainly isn't what we might think of as biblical exposition. And I don't want to completely bash that approach. There are good things that come from it, but it doesn't really ever get you very far. And so I think when you have people who probably don't read their Bibles all that much, and you have people who need to be confronted with the truth of who Jesus is, man, you do not help them by not delivering that mail on a Sunday morning, because they need the word, because they're being discipled by cable news, they're being discipled by their algorithm and
Yep.
the scrolling that they do. They're doing that for hours a day, and even if they're reading, for 10 minutes that morning out of the scriptures, the balance of discipleship happening is not through the word. So if you can help them in that 40 minutes of time that you have on Sunday morning to not only deliver the truth and confront them with it, but over time, if they can watch their pastor exposit God's word, unpack the scriptures, the thing that happens is they actually learn how to read the Bible for themselves. It becomes less about pulling verses out that might apply to me that day, and more about reading through a passage and doing observation and doing interpretation and doing application. Basic Bible study gets built into someone who sits under good expositional preaching. Now, something I I've said before, maybe on this podcast, I don't know, but uh, I don't remember 99% of the meals I've eaten, but they've kept me alive. You don't remember 99% of the sermons you hear, but that is what God uses to shape and beautify and grow you over a period of time. And I do think, because the whole thing is worship, both the preaching and the singing. We don't need to bifurcate those two things. The whole thing is worship. But if those two things can be pulled together in a thoughtful way, so there's not this dissonance between this very grandiose approach to passionate worship and then this very kind of neutered, sermon on the backside of it, sermonette on the backside of it, man, something's wrong there. If we're going to have worship that looks like this, let's have preaching that looks like this, instead of having the dissonance between the two. Old Vance Havner, he was a pretty fiery preacher in the first part of the 20th century. He said, sermonettes, all they do is make Christianettes.
Hey, that'll preach, my goodness.
That'll preach, yeah.
Well, so you use a word there, so it's like, and you're right, there's this passionate worship service, and then it's almost like no matter who follows it, it's a bit of a letdown. And so the pastor, if you can call them that follows, they have to light it up. They've got to be funny. They've got to be engaging. We can't just march our way through First Thessalonians and then march our way through whatever's next. Like, we can't do that. It's just, it's not as sticky in the brain. It's not going to grip these people. But I think for a lot of people, especially the people that are making this kind of music, passion is the point. So while they're playing it, they want you to have an impassioned response to their chord progressions, to the lyrics, to the fact that they make you sing it over and over and over and over again for 17 minutes. And so, and this became a major sticking point for me, Jay, and you and I have talked about this, and I've talked about it ad nauseum on the show, is it became that CCM became synonymous with worship music, to where it's not worship music unless it's contemporary Christian worship music. And so there's no category for worship hip hop or worship country or worship indie or worship underground death metal, like the stuff that I'm into. And so what happened for a lot of men that were in churches of varying kinds, that were somewhere on the continuum between hymns and Hillsong, they go in there and then they're forced to sing these songs that are not only just bad songs, they're just not well done songs, but the lyrics, if you took out the name, Jesus, and put in the name Mike, it sounds like you're singing to your boyfriend. Like, the whole point is you've got to be impassioned. You've got to be in tears. Your hands got to be up. You got to be falling out in the aisle. And if you're not really wired for that, or that's not really your disposition, you are a little bit more stoic. I've heard pastors say, well, hey, you may not be saved. I was told I may not be saved because I don't like Christian contemporary radio or music or anything like that. Hey, you've got a major pride problem if your hands are left in your pocket during the worship service. But I'm like, for the people that are saying that, have you ever looked at what you're presenting to the men and thought to yourself, maybe I'm somewhat responsible for the fact that their hands are in their pocket? There could be a pride issue there. Let's acknowledge that. But then you talk about participatory singing versus like, I'm just going to watch. And so if men don't have a part to play, they typically go do something else. That's another thing that happens on Sunday mornings. If there's nothing here for me to do, I'll go tinker in the shop. I'll go golf. I'll go shoot. I'll go do something else, right? And so I guess I worry about these pastors that are just so cocksure that, no, this is how worship is done, and you're just going to do it. And if you don't have your hands up, there's something wrong with you. When I just want these guys to just stop and pause for a minute and just think, hey, I'm aiding in this process. Maybe some of these men are broken. Maybe some of them are not. Maybe there's something else that we can present. And I've seen videos, Jay, of a room full of men singing the doxology with no backing. No drums, no guitars, no microphones, no organs, no pianos, just men's voices. There were parts which represented every male voice, the whole spectrum, every pitch, all the things that you could get to. And there wasn't a single man sitting there silent with his hands in his pocket. It's like, guys, that might be a hint to you that this whole worship wars thing is leading us in a place that I don't know that we necessarily want to go.
Yeah. I think back, this is not a new phenomenon. C.S. Lewis, he was critical of church music. I think he called it fifth-rate poetry set to third-rate music. And
that needs to be a T-shirt only for the insiders. Let's go.
And but in the same passage, he he reflects and realizes, but there's something important going on here that I must participate in. And he references looking across the church hall or the sanctuary at a shabbily dressed old man, and seeing him sing and realizing, I don't even deserve to clean that guy's boots, and just compelling him to participate and worship with the saints, because that's what we're commanded to do in Scripture. Regardless how we judge the music, or if it's our style, or if it fits our preference, or whatever else, it's actually commanded for us to sing to one another. And one of the coolest parts of my Sunday morning, because of where I sit in the worship center, kind of on the wing, kind of toward the front, and our worship center is sort of fan shaped, I have this perspective kind of on the whole room, where I'm able to kind of look across, and I sit there for security purposes on one hand, but also sit there just because I like to take in what's going on in the room. And I love to watch our men sing, and I love to look across and know a little bit about this guy who's singing with his whole heart, and know that, okay, he's got a cancer diagnosis, he's got this going on in his life, and look at him, he's singing. Or this person over here who I can tell is not disengaged. They're locked in to what's going on. And so I do think the worship is a volatile subject for a lot of guys, and I think there's a way that it's been done that sort of maybe marginalizes or ostracizes some of the voices in the room. But it's interesting. We used to have a lot of opinions and a lot of voices at Faith, or a lot of critiques at Faith Bible about worship. Those have largely fallen away. And I think a lot of it relates to, we have a worship pastor that understands so well what it means to arrange a piece of music, that wherever your voice fits in the range, you can kind of find the slot, which I'm not a music person.
Same,
that didn't mean much to me until it was pointed out to me, because there's other guys I've sat under where I want to participate, but for some reason, my voice doesn't fit what we're doing,
And what was the thrust of the complaints that Faith was getting previously on the worship side?
Oh, just the typical stuff: song choice, volume, this, that, and the other. And I think volume is a big part of the discussion, because in the black box arrangement, where the focus is the platform, a lot of times the volume is cranked up.
Oh man, big time.
And what that does is it drowns out the voice of the congregation.
Yeah, there's no congregational singing.
And some people would argue and say, well, we do that so you would be uninhibited. You can just sing out. But I've found the opposite to be true. It sort of sets them aside and says that what we're really doing is up here, not out here. And what I try to do is I don't ever want to call those leading us in worship the worship team, because the worship team is the congregation. The choir is the congregation. What we're doing here, we're doing all together. This group's leading us. They're facilitating this. They're helping us. But this is for all of us to be participating in so that we can do it well. The grading of worship usually just relates to how well the people on the platform are doing. I would say the grade comes with how much participation is taking place. And I think there are, if you think about some circles, if you think about a devotional circle that overlaps with a theological circle that overlaps with a singable circle, in the center of that Venn diagram is where a church should largely live. In the center of songs that are devotional, they're heartfelt, you connect with them, they're theologically rich, they're true to Scripture, they have a high view of God, and then that they're conducive to corporate worship. We can sing this together in a way that has, power and edifies and all those things that are needed in the corporate gathering. So
I have a request on the worship side of things.
Okay.
Actually, 3 requests. Number 1, would it kill y'all to get a banjo up there? Just for once, maybe steel guitar, get a little bit of stuff.
So the guy that played banjo on Sunday, over there on Sunday.
Yeah.
The guy that played bass guitar on Sunday, he is the curator of the Banjo Museum. He is
in downtown. Okay.
Yes, he is the best. He's the best banjo player in the state of Oklahoma. We have him in our church.
Jay, We just put him in the back next to the drummer in a box, and it's like, what are we doing here? So Banjo Man's at our church?
At our church. He had a bro come with him one day, and had a steel guitar with it.
Okay, my request is turning into a demand. I demand that we have that. Like, that's got to be like
Tyler's
something.
great, super gifted musician.
Okay, and I'm going to get rid of one of my requests, and so I can have both requests go into one demand. And so, like, why is that not? That's like the best kept secret at our church.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Okay, now I'm furious. But like, we're going to figure that part of it out. And then the other thing I remember, and I've told this on the story or on the show before. It was Easter this year. Okay, so woke up that morning and, kind of normal Sunday morning. My wife and I had even discussed not going to church because it's like, of all the times not to go, are Christmas and Easter, because they just become, it's just a banana sandwich. There's nowhere to park. You don't want to take a spot, because every time I go, I park way out in the boonies anyway to not, take a spot away from a new person. And then just someone who's gone there for 20 years takes a spot I would have taken anyway. So it's kind of a waste. But like, so that morning, I'm getting ready, and I've got, for whatever reason, I put some Phil Wickham on, and I was just like choking on the words. It was like, maybe it was the setting, maybe it was just, what I had in my diet the day before or whatever, but like just the truth in the words. And Phil Wickham does a great job of that. He submits his lyrics to theologians to make sure he's saying the right things. Like, I love that about him. And then I come to church expecting the same worship that we get every week, which is fairly predictable and all these types of things. But there was a choir, which we don't normally have, small choir. And the song arrangements were so off the charts good. And the medleys, like one thing into the next. And I forget what hymn it was at the end. It may have been How Great Thou Art or something like that. And we didn't have, only for the very young children was there childcare, but for slightly older children, there wasn't. And so 6-year-old James, who had never, no, he would have been 5 at the time, James had never been in service with us. Awesome. And so there's a lot of different things going on. Like, how's this going to work out? And as soon as they get into like How Great Thou Art, he reaches up and grabs my hand. And like, I about melted. I'm trying not to melt right now, just describing it, because there was nothing that y'all did to try to conjure up that emotion. It was all about worship, like worshiping God, worshiping Yahweh, that whole deal. But there was just something that had set the tone getting into that environment. But I guess my question is, outside of the banjo and steel guitar thing, which like the easiest lay down yes of all time, I'll even start calling it ABF if we start having banjo.
This is big.
That's how serious. I'll never say anything nice about Lord of the Rings or mint chocolate chip ice cream, but I will say this: I will start using ABF if we can get that banjo and steel guitar at least bi-weekly. Okay. But the other thing is, the amount of effort that was put into the Sunday morning service for Easter is not the same as the amount of effort, seemingly from the outside looking in, as the normal Sunday. Don't normally have the choir. Again, you have to make sure people will show up to be on the choir. It's like, how much of a revolving door can you have? Most of these people are volunteers. They can't be expected to, to just do things based on whatever the worship pastor wants to do. But just kind of explain that to me as a congregant of Faith Bible, because I was not the only one that heard positive things about the worship, when typically in my circles, if worship is brought up at all, it's not always in the most positive light, if that makes sense.
Yeah. There's different things going on there. First of all, I would say at holidays, Christmas, Easter, when there's not ABF happening, there's always parking. You never have to worry about parking on holidays.
I guess that's true.
Because we're just turning over the parking lot for each service. So we don't have any of that overlap. So people aren't staying for 2 hours. So parking is never an issue. After those days, I'm always like, why do we have ABFs? Why do we have Sunday school? This is so much easier without it. Yeah. But I understand the value of ABF, Sunday school, whatever we want to call it today. And then to the thrust of your question, the worship team does an incredible job week in, week out of serving the church in worship. Now, I think on a day like Easter Sunday, you do have a little bit more going into it. So, like you said, a choir. Everybody loves a choir,
sure,
but nobody likes a bad choir. And what it takes,
or a kids choir. Can I be one of those guys that says the one of the worst sounds ever is kids singing? Can we never do that ever again?
And so to have a good choir, you got to have some commitment there. And so you can get those people to commit in the 3 or 4 weeks leading up to Easter, but 12 months out of the year, they're not going to commit, and then it's not going to be what you want. So I think that explains some of what we do with choirs. It's typically a shorter term commitment because the long term commitment, we've tried that, it's just not going to be there. Then also the other thing I think you have people who show up more ready to worship. And so you have an energy in the room that is palpable.
Yeah, the empty tomb is on their minds.
Yeah. And so, people come into Sunday morning gathering with all kinds of things going on in their heart and their mind. And they're not ready to work. They haven't worshiped all week. If you haven't worshiped all week, you're not going to show up on Sunday ready to roll. You might get there by the third song on a good day. But you're still carrying whatever concern or anxiety or thing or fight that you had with your spouse or whatever into the room. And so, but on that day, it's a little bit different. I think people are a little bit more locked in. Their hearts are a little bit more prepared for what they're about to do. And I think that's a factor. But one of the coolest things I think you mentioned is, and this relates to kind of how we operate as a whole, is by the time a kid gets in about first grade, we want them in worship with their parents. Because other places have kids' church and a setup where kid may not worship alongside an adult until they're in high school or something. I don't think that serves that kid very well. I don't think it serves that family very well. I think James and Eli need to watch mom and dad sing and participate and sit down and take notes and lock in with the sermon. I think they're not learning a whole lot in the preaching time when they're 7 years old. A lot of us just going above their head or whatever. They're picking up some things here and there. But what they are watching is the two most important people in their life participate in something that they care about, and then and that's going to lead them to care about it later on. I think going back to another part of our conversation, I think some of what exists as church today is just youth ministry for 18 to 50-year-olds. Because what happens is, if they grew up in church, from the time they were little, they had kids' church, then they had junior high group, then they had high school group, and they got to college and were part of some college ministry that was geared specifically for them. And then they get out of college and they have never worshiped next to somebody in their 50s. I don't know what it looks like.
Yeah.
And then when they go into a church and they're, for lack of a better word, forced to, they don't like it because it's not catering to them. Mm-hmm. It's not their little life stage that's been catered to all along the way isn't being accommodated. And so they tap out. They're like, that's not for me, because they never had to do it.
Yeah.
And so I know there are people maybe that just come for the 1 hour and they don't bring their elementary age kid into worship with them. I get that. I'm not condemning that. But if you're there 2 hours, and your elementary kid can go to Sunday school and then follow you to worship, there is so much value in them just being in there with you and holding your hand when the crescendo rises or whatever. So
yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird. There's like a quote from like the very end of the show, The Office, where one guy's like, I wish someone would tell you you're in the good old days when it's happening.
Right.
Like that kind of thing. Like sometimes you don't realize it's a core memory until you get a little bit further away and you're like, oh gosh, save some sort of dementia. I'm going to remember that until the moment that I die. Because the moment James reached up and grabbed my hand, I felt like I got a slice of heaven, right? Because I know there's a lot of focus on, a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on, I'm going to get to see this person again someday, when it's like the point of heaven is not the people that are there. It's the God that's there that, you're giving your worship to eternally. Mm-hmm. Right. And again, we don't even know how that's going to look and, what it's going to be like, or if there's going to be lines to the roller coasters in heaven or any of those types of things. You don't really know. And so like, I think it's important for people to create space for things like that to happen. Because I've heard guys from our church that, their kid was in the sermon and then they asked a question that night before they went to bed, and you could tell the kid was chewing on it all day. And here you are just thinking, oh, they're just, you're messing around with drawings or, just trying not to like, completely go nuts. And it's like, well, something got in there. And our job as parents, again, is, we can't save our kids. We can't, save them into heaven. Like we can't do any of those things. We can't convince them to accept the gospel. We can gather a bunch of kindling, right? And put it around them, put them around godly people, continue to expose them to the word of God, and pray that the Holy Spirit penetrates their heart. I want to back up just a little bit because we started talking about some faith Bible stuff, but
Mm,
obviously you're doing the ministry stuff in Enid, but you eventually find your way to faith Bible, and so you did tell us on the last
hmm
podcast, but just do a quick flyover because you were at Faith Bible, you left for a stretch, and then you came back, and
Yep.
during that stretch, one of the worst decisions in the history of Faith Bible happened whenever they made the official decision to change it from Sunday school to adult Bible fellowship, which again no one knows what that is, and so it was because you left that
Yeah.
happened. So I do hold you personally
I understand.
responsible
I
for that.
understand.
So talk about kind of like finding Faith Bible,
Yeah.
leaving for a stretch, coming back, and then I want to kind of get into what the future looks like.
Yeah. So another key factor too in me coming into pastoral ministry is by God's grace, I had friends in high school, close friends, that were all Christians, and many of those guys tracked toward ministry as well. And these are guys I'm still friends with today, still talk to every day. And so it was almost a collective. And a lot of us did come to faith in Christ through the FCA ministry, and just really cool to see what God did and used to kind of bring a lot of us, three or four of us, to the same place and to where we're still all in vocational ministry now. But so yeah, 5 or 6 years into my time in Enid, about 5 years in, I realized I got to get some education. I need seminary, and started looking around. And I had actually done a little bit of coursework through Southwestern Baptist in Fort Worth early on in my ministry days, but I'd kind of set that aside as just the ministry activity picked up, and wasn't in love with the program, and so I kind of stepped away from it. But I'd gotten to a point where I got to do something here, and was looking to go out to Biola, to Talbot, out in Southern California. Was thinking really hard about that, and one day in the fall of 2022, Mark called me, and Mark and I had some mutual friends. He and I had talked on a couple of occasions at a football game or whatever. We knew each other. We didn't know each other well, but I was the only youth pastor Mark knew, like, in the world, and so.
That story checks out.
And Faith Bible needed a youth pastor, and so he just called to see if I was interested. And I knew I needed to go to seminary. Some things that were also happening at the church I was at that had kind of loosened me up a little bit to where I thought, I could make a move. I'd had some opportunities to make a move prior to that I just really didn't feel great about, or didn't feel the freedom to leave. But I'd gotten to a place where I did feel some freedom to go. And so I remember I drove up from Enid. I had an 88 Land Cruiser at the time. And I drove up to Edmond, down to Edmond from Enid one fall afternoon, and came onto the Faith Bible campus. Had never been to Faith Bible before, even though I'd spent 4 years in college here. Didn't really know much about the ministry itself. Knew Mark, knew he was smart, knew he had written some books, and so forth. And so we sit down, and I'm like, hey, well, tell me about the church. Like, I don't really know anything other than you about this place. And I said, what do you want to be known for? What do you want to be about? What's your reputation? And he said, we want to just be known for teaching the Bible. And so that's it. In very simple Mark Hitchcock fashion. He just said, we just want to teach the Bible here. And that's what we want to be known for. And that just struck me. I'm like, yeah. And I was at a Southern Baptist church that was a little bit hyperactive, and a lot going on for a lot going on's sake, and that whole mode of ministry after 5 years was weirding me out a little bit. And so when he said that, I'm like, okay, that connects. And then I said, well, I feel like I need to get some education, and here's where I'm at with that. And he's like, well, we'll figure out a way to help you with that. And so it just checked a couple of boxes. And so by the spring of 2003, I was on the ground as student pastor at Faith Bible, started to pursue my master's. And my wife and I, we were 27, 28 years old, didn't have kids yet. So she was teaching school, and I was doing student ministry. We felt like we had a lot of kids, and we always said we were going to wait a few years before we had them. And what's interesting is, because we were 27, 28 years old and we showed up at Faith Bible without any kids, the Faith Bible culture, it existed the same then as it does now. Everybody was looking at us like, hey, something's wrong with you guys.
That's right.
Because by 28, most people had 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any. And so when our first 2 were twins, everybody's like,
Getting caught up. Let's go.
Yeah. So something was in the water. We caught up. Did youth ministry at Faith for about 5 more years after I arrived. And then the church was not growing dramatically, but incrementally. And nobody was doing a lot with adult ministries. Nobody was doing a lot with adult Sunday school, for instance, or men's ministry, or missions for that matter. And I was already doing some in the missions area because of my student ministry involvement. And so I moved out of student ministry. We had a couple of children, and so that actually fit really, really well. I had a mode of doing student ministry that just wasn't real conducive to like family life. I was, going on a lot of trips and spending a lot of evenings with students at ball games and this and that and the other. And so as we were having kids, the transition made sense on that level. And so just started to develop more of the adult ministries at Faith Bible, Sunday school being one of them. We didn't have the version of adult Sunday school we had early on, late 90s, early 2000s, was sort of elective based. Like you just went to classes based on what was being taught. But we had a couple of classes come online that were more like for newly married people or for this sort of affinity group that were more based in fellowship and care and ministry and stuff. And so we wanted to develop some more of those. And so I kind of took that on. And then in 2012, I was feeling an itch to preach more and to lead in that capacity. And Mark was always gracious in giving me opportunities to. But I had a church back in Enid. Again, I go Enid, Edmond, Eden, Edmond. That's just my path in life. Can't get away from these 2 towns. And it was a church that I had a connection to just through some friends and through the Christian high school that my wife had gone to, and her dad was the headmaster of up there, Oklahoma Bible Academy. And they needed a pastor. And I said, no way, I'm going to go back to Enid and pastor this small church. Like, this is crazy. But I really loved a couple of people that I knew that were engaging me in the conversation. And I told Mandy about it, and she's like, Jay, I'm not moving back to Enid. Now, mind you, this is a woman who said, in college, she would never live in Enid and she would never be married to a pastor. So we had already lived there once. I was a pastor, and we were thinking about moving back there again for me to continue to pastor. So never say never. So first meeting that she was involved with this group, she was immediately sold. She said, we got to go do this. And I remember when I was still praying through it, I was at the intersection of 81 and Willow Road in Enid, and I was praying, and kind of a rougher part of town, especially coming out of living in the Edmond context for so many years. I'd been here almost 10 years. And I'm sitting at that intersection, and it just kind of, this little question hit me in the face. It was, Jay, do you love people or do you love certain kinds of people? Do you like polished, professional, suburban, uppity types, or do you like all people? Do you like people from, that operate a farm, blue collar, this and that, people that struggle? And that just hit me pretty hard. And I was just like, yeah, God, I love people. And took the call there in the summer of 2012, and spent 4 years there preaching 50 times a year, all but 2 Sundays a year at this little church. And after a few years of doing that, Faith Bible had gone through a pretty significant, sort of seed, like a line change, however you want to say it, reorganization of leadership on the staff side. And so they pursued me, asked me if I want to come back to serve in the role of lead pastor, which was a position that they had put together with me in mind, which is extremely flattering and affirming to be approached by a group of men that you respect, that know your weaknesses. It's easy just to put your strengths out there in a resume or whatever else. These guys knew my weaknesses, but because they also knew some of the strengths I had, they wanted me to return. And so my impulse, my original answer was no, I can't. I got some things I'm in the middle of right now. I can't. I got to do. There's people out there because of Faith Bible's profile, because Mark's connection to DTS. There are candidates out there that would be better at this job than me. You should pursue those guys. Well, 9 months or so go by. They come back to me. Hey, we still are looking at this role for you. And I remember in a larger setting, sitting there looking at the new staff that they had hired. And Mark was the only one that had been there prior. Every one of the new staff they had hired had just been at the church for 2 months, 3 months. And the thought I had was, there are guys that can do this lead pastor thing at Faith Bible better than me, but none of them have 10 years of history at the church. None of them know the body in the way that I know the body. And that's what this church needs. This church needs a pastor on staff that knows it. And so that was kind of the big, just the big kicker that pulled me back to Edmond. That was in 2016, so I've been back a little over 10 years. And here we sit today.
Well, so I'm curious on the trajectory of that 10 years, because best I can guess or remember is I would have gotten there maybe 2 or 3 years after you came back. And so this is pre-COVID. This is in pre-new building,
yes.
Or the build onto the building.
Mm-hmm.
We were basically, when I started coming, we were meeting in whatever the youth gymnasium would have been, right? With all the chairs set up and those types of things. And then there was the old side and, all that. Mm-hmm. But then there was a hockey stick thing that happened. And I know it's been talked about a lot by the elders, by you, by, the rest of the staff, by Mark. Like, okay, where did that come from? Like, what was the positioning of that made that possible? Because there's partially an element of if you build it, they might come, right? It's not that they will, it's that they might, right? And then there's some people that build it and then it fills up immediately, which is kind of what happened to Faith Bible, where, there was a stretch there, and I don't know how big it got, but there were like 5 to 10 new families being added to the kids area weekly. Like, what? Like that? So that's mom and a dad and like somewhere between 1 and 5 kids, right? Like being added every single week. And it seemed like there were 2020, I think, caused the scales to fall off a lot of people's eyes on a lot of different areas. Like, whether that's trust in government or government institutions, trust in our moral betters, trusting in what people say versus what they mean, right? So they say Black Lives Matter, but what they mean is give money to this communist organization so we can buy real estate for ourselves. Like, that's what that meant. It wasn't a statement of fact about image bearers of God that had a certain level of melanin. It was a grift to make money from a real estate scheme. And so a lot of people started seeing things differently. And so a lot of people in our community, call it the greater Edmond, North Oklahoma City area, were at churches where it was like all of a sudden they're like, let me evaluate what we've been talking about here at this church for the last 2 to 5 years. Has this just been a revolving, hey, okay, we're going to do every 2 years, we'll do a money series and we'll do a marriage series, and then we'll do some random topic. And then we'll turn, the story of Samson into a 5-week series so the men aren't completely disengaged or just something like that. That was kind of what people started to do. And then people became like, they had a voracious appetite. I read in a book somewhere where it's like, if you don't have an appetite for the Bible, that's one thing to call into question your salvation. Like, is there any fruit there? You like, if you just have this aversion to even reading it. But then you had people that are like, wait a minute, I own one, but it's not worn in. And I don't even take it to church because I have the app, and, I don't even need to do anything. And church was just super easy for them. And there was no expectation that they would ever try to feed themselves, because why would I feed myself when, the pastor, he's studying during the week, right? And then he's just going to tell me what I need to know and then give me some life application and all's going to be great. But I want to know from your perspective, like, okay, when was the idea we need to expand the size of our building? You obviously didn't know COVID was coming. When did y'all as a staff kind of see that hockey stick in attendance and interest in Faith Bible over other churches and ministries in our area start to go up? Because I remember watching you guys, and it was like every elder and pastor I saw for a stretch there for a few months, it seemed like y'all were on fire. Like y'all, and I don't mean like you were excited. I mean like, there's so many people here. Like, we got to make sure like everything gets done. And it just seemed like it was crazy. It kind of felt like it all happened at once, but that's, from my perspective, I want to hear from y'all's perspective.
That energy will be there in a couple of weeks when everybody's sort of back to church here for the fall, and we'll have another little uptick of people. But going back to my first day back in the office in 2016, Burge Troxel, who was senior adult pastor at the time, and he'd been a part of some master planning. I'd been there 10 minutes, and he comes in with a set of drawings, puts them on my desk. He said, "You got to figure this out." And so first day, I'm looking at sort of what they're thinking about, and the dollars that were being entertained relative to the amount of growth being planned for didn't add up. It was like, okay, this gets us 500 more people here for $28 million. That
Math is a math.
yeah, it doesn't seem like maybe the best use of funds. Let's scrap this concept. And so we entered into what we called the Greater Things campaign, and stewardship was at the top of the list in how we were going to build out the campus. And that's why we went into the existing gymnasium. It just so happened to be the right height to put a balcony in there. And I remember leading up to kind of finalizing those plans. How much capacity are we going to plan for? What Mark and I had this discussion, like, okay, people are going to church less, not more. So people are twice a month Christians these days.
Yeah.
The squishy middle is going away. You either are or you're not a Christian. And so sort of the nominal people are going to be falling off more and more too. And so we thought, okay, if we build this out with 50 to 60% more capacity, that's going to be just right. That gives us 2,000 people here. That's a lot of people to say grace over. Full steam ahead. And so that's what we did. That's about the capacity we tried to figure out was, 2,200 or so people on campus. And right after we finished that build out in December of 2019, punch list was done. We're feeling great going into the new year. COVID happens. We're out of the building for 10 weeks. And we're like, man, I wonder if we just overbuilt. Nobody's even here. And then slowly people came back. By summer, we were kind of all systems go with programming. And we're starting to see a lot more new faces. We're like, who are all these folks? And we're starting to not see a lot of people that had been mainstays. And they're just staying away from whatever reason, or maybe there was that great reshuffling of churches there in that period of time. People seize the opportunity that maybe they wanted to leave their church, or anyway. But then we're also seeing this influx of people from the Pacific Northwest and California and coming up from Texas, and this kind of migration piece to it all as well. And I think one of the things that happened during COVID, during the political turmoil of 2020, with that whole great reshuffling, faithful Christians that had been a part of churches for years, what they realized is, oh, I'm not squishy, but I think my church is. And because of either the way they were talking about politics, or because that whole season woke them up to realize my life has to be anchored in something really, really deep. And I'm realizing right now it's not. And so where is a church that's going to give me the depth of truth that's going to keep me from just getting blown over in these storms that our culture is experiencing? And so that was part of the influx as well, is people just realizing, okay, I don't, if this is the way culture is headed, I need to be at a place that's going deep with people and really, really delivering the truth of God's word in an unapologetic way. And so that led to a lot. Now, we made space. So providentially, we made space. Providentially, people started looking around or moving into town and wanting to go other places. And then providentially, there were a couple of churches in town that just kind of hit a wall, started struggling. And good churches, big churches, with a lot of people in them. And we ended up with a large group of people from those contexts. So it was the confluence of probably, 10 different things that has led to the growth. And what's funny, if I look back at 2002, when I showed up to talk to Mark, and then showed up as youth pastor in the spring of 2003, we were a church of 600 people. And never in my wildest dreams did I think that we would be like the desirable place, like the cool place, whatever category you want to put it in. It was very niche at that time. It was a church that appealed to Bible church people. Certain theological convictions, certain convictions about maybe the way church was done or worship was done, whatever. But now, just through a series of providences and just through a real investment in church staffing and building out some systems that accommodate growth, we're now, whatever we are, 3,000 people a weekend, 5,000 people at Easter, whatever. Those are numbers that just baffle me. I find hilarious at times.
Hey guys, real quick, I just wanted to remind you that we have an official Undaunted Life store. You can go to shop.undaunted.life or check it out in the show notes. Guys, we're always going to have hats and shirts and a bunch of other awesome stuff. Go there, support us, wear the mission. Again, it's shop.undaunted.life. Check out the link in the show notes, shop.undaunted.life. Okay, I was going to ask you on how many people are coming on a normal Sunday, not during the summer, not during holidays or something like that. And so immediately there's the idea of these people are here now. What do we do with them? Obviously, the expectation is they go to a Sunday school class. They go to one of the 3 services. But then I've also heard arguments from people that I really respect, like the late Bodie Baucham, as it pertains to, look, if your church has multiple services, what you have are multiple churches. Mm. So you have the 8:30 church, and then you have, or the 8 o'clock church, you got the 9:30 church, the 11 o'clock church, you've got the online church, you've got the whatever. So I'm curious, because y'all never really had to deal with that dynamic. Y'all were doing some, live stream stuff, and they're in nursing homes, and people that are fans of Mark's preaching all over the globe would kind of go into that. Mm-hmm. But I mean, our church really isn't conducive for the online church is your church. That's your church body. You just sit there on your fat butt on your couch because you don't want to get dressed and come to church. But for people that had just had surgery or they're infirmed in some way, right, you're still ministering to those people. But obviously, the church takes the Bible and discipleship very seriously, which is, something that's kind of the first 2 things that are not dealt with at some other things. Let's not deal with the Bible. That could get a little persnickety. Yeah. And then we're not going to really do
people disagree about that.
Yeah. And it's so we're not going to do the discipleship thing. We're basically going to let, the home group people do the discipleship because we got stuff to do. We got to build the next McCampus. We've got to do those types of things. And so you get this tremendous influx of people over a very relatively short period of time. So as a lead pastor, as an elder, how do y'all make sure these people are not only being fed, being taught how to feed themselves, but they're also being discipled along their sanctification journey, or that evangelism is happening because some of these people flat out, aren't saved yet?
Yeah. Discipling people in a rapidly growing church is difficult. And even in just I don't know what the metrics are now for mega churches or giga churches or what the numbers are to qualify you for those categories. But there's something even about being a church that size that attracts people who don't want to be known yeah, or an intensity related to discipleship. But I would say on the front end, one of the things we do care about is meaningful membership. So we think membership in the local bodies is a biblical thing. And so that's where Bodie and I would have agreement. Now he has a different view of the word ecclesia and what gathering means and one gathering and one body. And I get that. I'm not terribly sympathetic to it, but I get it. I understand where he's coming from. And I would say that approaching church that way does strip away a lot of complexities that tend to creep in when you start adding services. But as long as I've been at Faith Bible, we've always had more than one service. So even back in our 600-700 days, there were two services. At that time, there were different styles. Thankfully, along the way, we made everything one style, so people weren't choosing services based on their worship preferences. That's always a healthy move for a church, because then you really are inching toward more being one church rather than if you've got different styles and those all things going on, then you are inching away from being one church and being multiple churches. But I think meaningful membership, when people on board and we invite them into a membership process and we sit down with them one-on-one and we ask them about their testimony and they check off on the statement of faith, and we want to understand when they were baptized and what led to that, and we want to talk about their marriage and their family a good bit. I think that goes a long way because somebody who doesn't want to belong to a church isn't going to subject themselves to that. Really, there's not going to be the tolerance there. And so, I think now you have a really cool group of people in your ABF, but I think one of the most sanctifying things that people can get involved with in the small group setting is a group of people that they wouldn't otherwise be friends with.
Mm.
I think there's something supernatural going on that is bonding those people together as they care for one another and pray for one another and serve one another and find out that they really do love each other. I think the world can look on a group at a church that all looks the same and votes the same, is in the same life stage and the same whatever, and go, yeah, that makes sense that they like each other.
Yeah.
But if they look on, a group of people who's varied in their backgrounds, varied in their life stage, young, old, whatever else, and they manage to care and love and pray for one another, that's a pretty awesome thing. And I think God uses that to sanctify you and file off your rough edges in all kinds of cool ways. That paired with Bible teaching, paired with serving, to get, all those different things that you do in the context of a local church that help to sanctify you. But I do think that it starts with meaningful membership, helping people see that as you come on board here, membership language is not language we borrow from the culture. People think it is because you're a member of a country club or you're a member of, the car wash on the street, down on the corner down the street, membership language, you're a member at the gym, whatever. Membership language is biblical. A body has members. We are in Christ. We are in Christ's body. And so if your life's falling apart, if things are spiraling, if you've got a bad diagnosis or whatever else, and you're pleading for Christ to show up in your life, you know what he's going to do? He's not going to appear at the foot of your bed. The church is going to show up, and they're going to care for you, and they're going to provide meals, and they're going to pray for you, and they're going to come alongside you, and they're going to prop up your wife. Christ is showing up in your life through the ministry of his body. And so, that takes a meaningful connection to the body. So when we talk about the core value of connect with one another, we're talking about meaningful connection. We're not just talking about the stand and shake and greet one another time that some people love and some people hate. We're talking about meaningful connection that leads to ministry. I think that happens within the context of serving together, within the context of our Sunday school / ABF groups, the women's Bible study stuff, the men's Bible study stuff that takes place as well.
Now, it's just going to get more complicated if we say Sunday school / ABF, because now we're making it even longer.
I'm just trying to...
might as well just, Jay, I don't know how I can get you submitted to church discipline, but we've got to go backwards in time to the time.
I feel like we're up against a Jew-Gentile divide here.
No, we're not. Actually, this is no one in church likes it. And I, as evidence of that is I said it, right? So here I am doing my own Candace Owens impression. I don't have to present you evidence. I just have to say, actually, I heard about it in a dream. The Lord told me we're going back to Sunday school, and I think everyone's going to be okay with it. So we good? We good with that?
I think everybody would be okay with it.
Okay, all right. So we're going to by the end of the year, we're making that happen. It's going to work out well.
Yep.
But
I'm
I do
talk
have
to
a question. I remember being absolutely floored. Jay, this may have been over 10 years ago. There was a guy I was talking to that was a pastor at a congregation in Edmond. I can't remember. All right, I remember the name of it now. It doesn't matter which congregation he was at. He was just a buddy that, I would hang out with sometimes and would do jujitsu with sometimes. And he just made this comment because when you live in Edmond, and as I've said on the show a bunch, Edmond's like Camelot, right? All the people are really done up. It's kind of what you were talking about earlier, the Enid versus Edmond, right? So it's kind of the uppity, highly college educated. Most people have money or pretend to have money, nice cars, perfectly manicured lawns. The kids are in all the activities. They specialize in a sport at 3. And it's all the things in Edmond, right? And this pastor casually mentioned, he's like, you would not believe the levels of depravity in Edmond. And I was like, what are you talking about? The cops are bored here. They have to chase down people that have overdue library books. He's like, dude, there is so much abortion in this community. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, just think about it, Kyle. He's like a 15, 16-year-old girl. She's a star athlete, star student, all that, gets pregnant. And her family's got a reputation to maintain. And, if little Susie's a little bit of a whore, that doesn't work with the mode of what this family's trying to do, right? So the dad just pays $400 or $500 to kill his grandkid. And he's like, the rates of abortion in this town are astonishingly high. No one talks about it. He's like, rates of divorce are high. The rates of adultery are high. Substance abuse is insane. Like alcohol, other forms of substances, things that are easy to hide. Workaholism, if you want to get into other sins that maybe aren't as like, don't have as bright a lights or things like that. He's like, Kyle, you wouldn't believe the swinging culture that we have in this town of people that literally everybody shows up to a house, everyone puts a name in a bucket. There's the guy names and then there's the girl names, and then they just separate off into the bedrooms. He's like, that's what's going on in this town, but everything has this beautiful veneer of, women who have been altered and men who pretend to have more than they have. And so I'm curious for you as a minister, not just a minister of the gospel, but somebody that actually has to minister to people in a local congregation in this type of town. Like, and we're on the old money side of town. So there's even Edmond East dynamics versus Edmond West dynamics, right? And so in a way, we're in the belly of the beast. The beast just looks really good. So like, how hard is it to do ministry whenever we're in this area where, one, everyone thinks they're a Christian, and number two, like their flavor of depravity is just better than some of the other people's.
Yeah, I think I call them the up and out. You got the down and out, and you got the up and out, and there's plenty of people in this town that qualify as being in the category of up and out. And I think the hardest part of that person or that person's situation is the destruction that they cause through all of that behavior. Most of them can sort of buy their way through it. So a down and out person who's involved in all that stuff you just described, they really hit rock bottom because they can't buy their way out of those.
They're closer to bottom.
Yeah, they can't buy their way out of those circumstances. A lot of people in this town can pay their way through it and appear to still be doing okay, and present as still pulled together, when in fact they're not. And so I think that's the challenge is they have the resources to power through whatever circumstances their depravity gets them into. Yeah.
And so as a pastor, as an elder of this church, like how do you sift through all that to potentially have the evangelistic conversation or to potentially address the sin nature of a believer that is like allowing the world and these other circumstances, like, because I get some of the craziest emails and DMs from guys, and I mean, I'm not their pastor, and I make sure they know that. Like, look, I'm your favorite podcaster, and you just laid out abuse that you've suffered, and the drug use and the affairs, and like you just laid all this out in an email, and then you're like, what do I do? It's like, man, you just kind of gave up the reality, which is that you don't have men around you, you don't have a foxhole, and man, you're not submitted to the leadership of a local body of believers or a local elder or pastor, because you're asking me, a perfect stranger, in my DMs or in my inbox. But you know these people, you have relationships with these people, and for me, not being a pastor, like, how do you even go about helping that person see, like, hey, up and out is just as bad, it just looks different than down and out?
Yeah, and I think people in that crisis moment, they're going to do one of three things. They're going to numb out. That's one option. So they're going to go deeper into substance abuse or deeper into pornography or deeper. They're just going to numb out, escape, travel more, whatever. They're going to numb out, try to escape the issue. They're going to flame out, which means they're going to go even harder at it and just destroy their life and get into their second marriage or third marriage or fourth marriage or whatever. So they're just going to flame out, or they're going to go deep. And so as a pastor, you're trying to get them to go deep, trying to get them to go deep in relationships, deep into God's word, deep into whatever issue that they've got to just cut, whatever cancer it is that they've got to cut out of their heart, so that they can be a whole person instead of this person that they're trying to be. And so it's that going deep. And again, if the church is just serving up sermonettes, that's not going to get them to go deep. And if the relational level of the church is very surfacey. It's not going to get them to go deep. But if they have a group like some of the guys I know that exist in your class who are ready to go deep with one another, or how do you put it, carry each other's mat or whatever, that is ultimately going to be the thing. They're not going to do it by themselves. They need people. And one of the ways they probably got in the situation they're in is by being isolated and self-sufficient and on their own, and without accountability. So you got going deep brings all that around them.
One, going deep, you have to be known.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the thing. And it even drives me crazy in our Sunday school class because who is that? So Joby, he put it this way. I think he may have gotten it from another pastor. I can't remember. But the gist of it is basically like if you looked at your prayers over the last week and then all of a sudden God snapped his fingers and all of it came true, what would be different about the world? Like, I mean, hey, you just thanked him for this day. All right, the world's not any different. All right, you just thanked him that you got that parking space, that you got inside before the rains came, or you blessed his food to the nourishment of your bodies. It's like how different would the world be? And so I'll even see the prayer requests of our Sunday school, and it's like some people are like laying it all out there, like things are going wrong, like there's death, there's depravity, and other people are just basically like, oh, things are busy at school, and everyone's issue is their issue. It's like not everyone's constantly melting down, right? So it's not like everyone has to be at a level 10 of like panic at all times and anxiety, but when people are suffering in silence because they want to keep up with the Joneses or they want to keep up the appearances. And, that just becomes a major problem. And so when I get into these discussions with people and I'm like, bro, this started 2 years ago. Why are you coming to me now?
Well, and to your earlier question, 9 times out of 10, when the crisis gets on my radar as their pastor, the clock is expiring. We're late in the fourth quarter. Somebody's already got a lawyer. It's beyond repair or rescue, unless a miracle happens. And so if there's somehow those situations can get caught in the first quarter or before halftime, then that's what needs to happen. Because 9 times out of 10, we're down to the wire. This thing's over. Everybody's already settled on how this is going to go, whether it's a divorce situation or whatever else.
There's 2 types of people in this world. There are people that see the check engine light come on and then they schedule their appointment with GM. And then there's other people that put a smiley face sticker right on top of the check engine light and just say, this isn't happening. Everything's okay. Everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So for the last several years, really up until the last few months, there was kind of this constant question that was being peppered at Mark, at you, at the rest of the elders, like, hey, what are we going to do? Like, you built it and they came, they showed up, like, there's not enough. And it wasn't really like, I'm not getting my spot in the sanctuary. Someone else, it wasn't like that. It was just like, there's nowhere else to go. Like, we know y'all aren't going to spend $10 million on a parking garage, but like on the plot of land that the Lord bless us with, that we have dominion over, there's nowhere else to go, right? We're not going to build an 8-story church. It's just like, so what do we do? And I remember talking with Mark on the show, talking with him outside the show, and there was all kinds of ideas that were being bandied about. Trying to make even more additional and more creative adjustments to the current campus. Some of those churches that are part of, apostate denominations, those buildings are going to be shuttering before too long. Anyway, we're going to go in and we're going to do like a reverse seance and get all the dirty spirits out of here, throw out the pride flags, and then we're just going to take over and do Bible stuff.
Yep.
People are wondering, hey, are y'all going to do the Mick Church thing? Are we going to get a building and just put up a screen and, Mark can just preach multi-site and do that whole thing? And there were no good answers. And I remember, I want to get to what is actually going to be happening, which is what we're in process of. But I only know like this much about all the different iterations and ideas and almost, but didn't happen. And we put in an offer, it was accepted, but then it was rescinded. So can you kind of take us through all the different, like when y'all knew we got to do something and then it's like, all right, let's figure out what something means.
Yeah. So, I mean, that conversation goes all the way back to late 22, early 23, maybe even further back than that. We added, the first thing we did after extending faith, as we began to grow a little more, we knew we wanted to add more parking, so we did that. We were adding staff, and so we were just trying to find places for staff all over the building. We didn't really have a centralized office, so we thought about, adding on some offices or even putting a separate office building right in the middle of the parking lot, which that would have been really stupid at the time. I'm glad we didn't do that. We looked at the land across the street, which had become available in different stages, and that didn't work out, even though we had made a generous offer. The guy just didn't want us to own it. We'd looked at other offsite office locations. We currently do have an offsite office location. We looked at a large building in the Quail Springs area, larger than the one that I'll talk about here in a minute, and that didn't work out. Grateful that wasn't disappointing. So yeah, when it comes to your parking capacity, your building capacity, the number of seats you have in your worship center, the programming that you're trying to operate, everything kind of has to match. And when we built the building that we built back in 2019, when we finished it up, the programming that went into that design was 2 services. Well, as you know, we're at 3.
Yep.
And we have a confluence at 9:30 that really is problematic, both on the parking side and in the children's ministry area. So anyway, in 2023, that was the first time I threw out this term, or this name for what we might do next, which was extending faith. And again, it took a few different iterations, but going back to that point, it was also, should we tear down the single story structure? We've got the old kind of original building on the northeast side. Let's tear that down and build 2 stories there. That's problematic because that basically halts our ministry programming for 2 years. And what does that look like? And we still got a parking problem. We still got a cold chain problem, traffic and whatnot. So at the end of last summer, early fall last year, and it was really cool the way it kind of came together, because in an elder meeting, it was like the Holy Spirit convinced us all at the same time. Okay, let's stop waiting on a piece of land to fall in our lap. Let's stop waiting for a building to fall in our lap. Let's stop waiting for a church to close that we can swoop in and get. Let's go buy something and just start taking steps in that direction. Well, our original purchase was a piece of land. But right before closing on that piece of land, a building came to our attention that we had actually shown a little bit of interest in before, but it was just priced in a way that didn't make sense. And so it was 3201 Quail Springs Parkway, over kind of in the Quail Springs Mall area, just to the west, butts right up against the Crossings Christian School campus. And it was an old AT&T corporate call center building, 128,000 square feet. So right before we're about to close on this land, a realtor I'd gotten to know puts this building on my radar and says, "Hey, this has just gone back to the bank. I think you can get it for a steal. Do you want to go look at it?" I was like, "Sure." I've been in, 24 buildings over the last 2 years. So what's one more going to hurt? So we go through, look at it. We start crunching the numbers. Like, this is a really good deal. We can buy this building, remodel it, get into it at a really high possible capacity for a fraction of the cost. We're going to build something new on this piece of land over here. So we start working a deal, and we start thinking through the heat map of Faith Bible Church in terms of the giving units that are on that side of town. We start thinking through how luxurious it will be to have basically 5 different ways in and out of this this neighborhood where the church is plopped down on, or where the building is sitting. And we think, let's bookend this community with another congregation. We're over here at 600 North Coltrane. Depending on who you talk to, it's east side. Well, there's a spot over here on the west side, southwest side, northwest Oklahoma City, where we could plop down a kingdom outpost and be a place where we know we have a lot of people who already live in this area. And that getting east-west across Edmond is problematic. So let's put this right here and be a bridge to not only this part of town, but be a bridge further west, where we also know we've got people coming from. If you think about the Deer Creek School area, Piedmont, even Yukon. And so the extending faith, the basic vision is to extend the gospel reach of Faith Bible Church by mobilizing people to strengthen Coltrane, because we're going to do a little bit more development at Coltrane. We're going to kind of max out the footprint there. There's some things that we need to accommodate the growth that we've experienced, and also we really want to bring our staff back to campus. It's been fine. They've managed. Things have gone okay, not officing on campus, but getting everybody back together is going to be just, I think, huge force multiplier. So we're going to do some things to strengthen where we're at, and then we're going to establish that congregation, and hopefully over the next 10 years, establish multiple congregations. Those aren't video venues. They're not what'd you call them? Big churches?
Yeah.
They're not, it's not really a franchise approach per se, but I use the word a congregation. It will have its own live preaching, own live worship. It's have its own staff. The program will look similar. The pillars will be the same, timing and the exact complexion of the program that we have at Faith Bible may not look exactly the same. We may call it Sunday school. Who knows?
You already shook on it, so it's like it's already a thing. We know the banjo is going to be a part of it, and I want to get more into like.
And so I'm going over there to do that. I'm gonna establish that congregation in the fall next year.
Right. So I want to really dig into the fact that you just had a church dropped in your lap, like Merry Christmas to you, right?
Yep. Product of righteous living.
But just real quick, because I can already hear some people in my audience or people that are from this area. They're like, another church in Edmond, Oklahoma City, another church. Like even on that side of town, I saw a sign the other day for a church with the word faith in the name of the church.
On Portland Avenue. Yep.
And I had to do a double take, like, wait a minute, I thought they brought the thing. I was like, wait, that's not our church. And it butts up against to a huge church, maybe the largest single footprint church in the Oklahoma City metro.
Yep.
Church has got some massive issues. And so like some of those people would probably do well to refugee themselves somewhere else. But like at the same time, like address that objection, which is, did we really need another one? Did we really need another church? Like y'all do it so well that we need another one butting up against others? Yeah. My joke, Jay, is like if in Oklahoma, if you trip and fall in the process of catching your balance, you're going to touch 4 or 5 churches, right?
True.
Like that's where we're at.
Yeah, I would say, so the spirit of this isn't, Faith Bible Church is so awesome, we need more Faith Bibles. That's not it. We know we're not awesome. We know that duplicating ourselves is duplicating our strengths and our weaknesses. Hopefully we can mitigate that as best as we can. But if you drop a pin at Memorial in Portland, Memorial and Highway 74, and draw a 5, 7, 8 mile circle around that pin, you've got 250,000, you got 200,000 people. Yeah. That live in that area. There's density over there, unlike we have over here, condos, apartments, things like that. And so let's say Crossings was maxed out. It's right next door, and they had 10,000 people there on a Sunday. Let's say Coil Springs was maxed out, and they had 2,500 people there on a Sunday. There's still 95% of the people in that area aren't going to church anywhere. So there's still plenty of people to reach. I'm a fan of the local church. And again, I use the word kingdom outpost, where the rule and reign of Christ exists on this earth today is in the local church. And so let's invite people into that, and as many people as we can, because we think it's key to not only their flourishing, but the flourishing of the community in which it sits in. And so knowing that there are plenty of people in that pocket of town, and as you extend further west, that don't have a church home, let's put ourselves there and make that happen. And I think I've said this in our worship services before, which is, let's say 10% of the congregation of Faith Bible Church got really fired up about evangelism and about inviting someone to church. They can't do it.
No, there's nowhere to put them.
Let's say somebody that goes to Faith Bible, who lives in Lone Oak or lives in, Rose Creek or Quail Creek or somewhere over there by the mall, and says, hey, to their neighbor, come to church with me. And the neighbor says, oh, cool. Where do you go? Oh, well, it's over on Coltrane and Edmond. This guy who doesn't go to
minutes.
Yeah, this guy who doesn't go to church is going to cross town and go 30 minutes away to church. It's not going to happen. So it provides the ability to our people to invite people in to what we've got going on, and it helps those people who already on a Sunday morning do drive, whatever it is, 20, 25, 35, sometimes 40 minutes to church. It gives them that location that's just more friendly to where they're located, and more friendly to how they might reach their community. So that's some of the mission, the thinking about, okay, yes, we're this new church in this new location, but it is surrounded by 2 or 3 pretty large churches.
When so yes, you are going to be the senior pastor of this church. And I remember when all that was announced all at
Mhm.
once, it was like way too much information all at once
Mhm,
to kind
mhm,
of take in. And so inherent in that are a lot of different questions. Like, okay, with Faith by well, first of
mhm.
all, what's it going to be called? Do we
Faith
have an
Bible.
official name? So
Faith
it's
Bible Church.
okay.
Yep.
So it's going to be Faith Bible as
Uh-huh.
well. And so you got that. That was a question. Then it was like, okay, well, who's going to be the lead pastor under Mark?
Mhm.
Right. So is that going to be backfilled? Is that going to be someone from outside of the
Yep.
Faith Bible hegemon or whatever?
Mhm.
Well, I guess does that have an answer?
Yes.
Okay.
So the lead pastor title will still exist, and we're kind of tweaking some title thoughts right now. But so the Joel will assume the role of lead pastor, but it won't be
Who's currently the worship leader and is kind of transitioning.
currently our
to-
worship pastor. He's going to transition to lead pastor. The job description won't quite look the same as mine.
Yeah.
So sort of being the way I've described Mark and I's relationship as senior pastor, lead pastor, is he's teacher first, leader second. I'm leader first, teacher second. That teaching piece won't be quite as big a role for Joel. He will focus a lot of attention on just leading our staff. Our staff has grown, oh gosh, since, if we want to use 2022 as a marker, we've more than doubled in our staff size. And so some of the just both care for our staff, leadership of our staff, admin of our staff, HR, some of that stuff is where he'll find most of his energies focused. So he becomes lead pastor. I move over to Quail Springs Parkway to be the lead pastor there. There will be some aspect of which I come back to Coltrane and preach occasionally. Mark comes over there, preaches live occasionally. There was also the desire, the design to bring a couple of more voices onto the staff that can do some preaching at both locations. And maybe it's not 2 at once, maybe it's 1, and then another one as we find the right person. But I think there will be maybe a slight reorientation of the pulpit ministry in terms of we don't want a celebrity pulpit culture here where this is all about one guy. We want to raise up younger guys. We want to bring on a pastor or two that we know is a very capable preacher. I would say even beyond capable, very gifted preacher to bless and encourage our congregation. So those moves haven't been made yet. I think we'll look at the first half of next year to start making that stuff happen.
Well, that was going to be the next thing I was going to ask is like, okay, so Mark's in good shape. I know this for a fact because where I was doing my PT on my baby arm, he was in there lifting, getting after it. And so, but he's not a spring chicken either. Right. And so he's at or nearing the fourth quarter of whatever his calling is. And again, no one knows the hour they'll be called home. But he's not going to be doing this for forever. Has there been any talk about Mark's desire to, hey, I would like to preach and I would like to retire at this age? And then timeline wise, how long do you bring up kind of that young pup? What ideally, how old do we want that young pup to be when he takes over the flagship, right? Of Faith Bible, which was a plan of another church, but like the flagship where Mark has been at the helm for over 30 years as of right now. And by the time he's done, over 4 decades probably of faithful service to one congregation and one location. Like that's a big ask for somebody, but that's essentially what every successful pastor, and by successful, I don't necessarily mean, number of likes and subscribes or, book sales, but a pastor that faithfully serves whatever size congregation that the Lord has gave him, leadership over. There has to be a transition. And the idea is that the transition won't end with the shuttering of the doors of the church because, the next person just wasn't ready or, everyone was just used to the old guy. Let's, who cares about the new guy? So how do you even start to really unpack that further than what you just said?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to that and plenty of it that isn't really worked out yet. I mean, to your point, the old adage, there's no success without succession. I think that's true. And I think we agree as a pastoral team and as an elder team that needs to go the right way. Regardless, this is an old Warren Wiersbe adage. And I remember reading or seeing from him where when a pastor leaves a church, it's going to shrink by a third. As I think through some of the ministries that's occurred, that's kind of holds true. Somewhere in that range is pretty true. So is that going to happen with Mark? How do we prevent that from happening with Mark? I'll say this: Mark's in good health. Mark loves to preach. The unction, the passion is there, and he's a workhorse. He simply doesn't know what he would do with himself if he didn't have the projects that he has, the preaching that he has. And so I think for the foreseeable future, however you want to quantify that, 5, 7, 10 years, he's just going to stay at it. And I think that is going to be a blessing to our church, and because it's already been a blessing to our church. I mean, if you think about the stability of Faith Bible over the last 35 years, Faith Bible did go through a splintering in the early 90s, right as Mark was coming on board. But if you think the stability since then, and there have been little moments, little blips of turmoil, but for the most part, it's been a very stable church. That's because of the longevity of the pastor. I mean, he's trusted. We haven't tried to pull guys in and out over the years. He's just made that happen. I think that's going to be a blessing to our church going forward. It's going to be a blessing to this whole project of seeing other churches established. And I mean, I think from the get-go over there at Quail Springs, I'm not going to be a 48 weekends a year guy. Again, reorienting the pulpit in a way that says, once a month I'll be out trying to raise up a new voice, trying to prepare somebody maybe for another congregation that we'll do down the line. Or maybe even I'm open to establishing that one. And then when the third one's ready to establish, maybe I go and establish that one, get that one up and running, up and going. None of that's set in stone, but I'm open to all possibilities. I've always just wanted to serve Faith Bible Church as best I can. Even to the point as when we were talking through this whole plan, like, hey guys, if it is, to your question, if it is the best thing for our church for me to stay put, to keep my hands on these reins going forward, speak into that, because I'll do it. But as we talked it through, it seemed to be the best to establish that one with a known voice and somebody that was trusted and could bring a good group of people from Faith Bible over to Quail Springs Parkway to get that thing launched. What that number will be, I keep using the number 150 families, 400 people. If it's more than that, great. If it's less than that, great. And I think there's, again, plenty of people to reach over there. So
Timeline for launch?
Fall of 27.
Fall of 27. Oh, I asked this
early fall. Let's hope.
Okay.
Let's pray.
I asked this to you a while ago, and there wasn't a good answer quite yet. Own elder board, are the elders at Faith Bible East going to be over that flock as well? Where are we at with deciding
Great
eldership?
question. So the arrangement right now, we haven't set this is going to be the way it is for time immemorial, but the language right now is one church in 2 locations, one church meaning one elder board. Now, what the elders have affirmed is a provisional elder board. So basically, that's a group of men for me to work with, to do some decision making, a plurality of wisdom, to come alongside me so that I'm not trying to do this in isolation. So it's not just my project. And also so that some of the discussions that might pull our elder board into the weeds don't have to happen. We can just kind of have those over here, and I can report back. But I'll maintain a position on the Faith Bible Church elder board, the ruling elder board, as we call it. I'll maintain a position there, and it will essentially govern both congregations. But the congregations at Quail Springs Parkway will have sort of a provisional group of elders to start with, and then we'll see how that takes shape over time. Yeah.
Well, and also I'm curious for you. I mean, so how many times are you preaching per year at Faith Bible East?
10 to 12.
10 to 12?
Yeah.
And so first calendar year, how many times do you foresee yourself doing that at the new location?
Oh, probably 35 to 40. Definitely over 35, probably 36 to 40.
So we're talking, 3 to 4X of what you're currently doing now. So first of all, are you nervous? And then second of all, like I know, so your style and Mark's style is very transcribe heavy, not as much, bullet point and go, or bullet point and flow, however you say it. And so like, that's more my style. Like the only thing I technically transcribe a little bit more is the Daily Blade, because I know there's a little bit of a time crunch there. but I'm just used to getting in at a particular time, or hey, it doesn't matter. I can record for 3 minutes or 3 hours. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter. I just need to elucidate the point fully. But for you, like, I mean, I've watched your progression in your preaching style and your effectiveness improve over the last several years, even from the first time that I watched you preach. But for my money, when you go a little bit further off of the transcript, more of your natural personality comes out. And I know you're not trying to create a
Mhm.
cult of personality, but there's a little bit more levity. There's a little bit more like kind of sarcastic, joking, tongue in
Mhm.
cheek type stuff that comes in. It's not as lecture heavy and as serious.
Right.
And there's pluses and minuses to all that, and I can argue both sides.
Mhm.
I'm just curious for you as you look forward to, a year-ish from now, a year plus from now, which is what we're praying for. What is your preparation going to have to change and
Mhm.
be like for you to, 3, 4x the preaching you're doing, style differences, like
Yep.
any of those kinds of things?
So when I went to Enid that second time and pastored there, like I said, I was 48, 50 weeks a year in the pulpit, and so that rhythm I've done before, and so it doesn't necessarily scare me. I do remember though at one point up there, I think I'd done like 25, 26 weekends in a row,
Mm,
and it just kind of hit me like I need a break.
yeah.
Like I just did 6 months of preaching. What am I doing? And so tapped out and asked the youth pastor to preach that week and kind of gathered myself. But I'll remain a transcriber, at least initially, for a couple of reasons. One, I just really, the economy of language that is used when you transcribe is important to me. I don't want to waste a lot of words if I can help myself. When I don't transcribe, I tend to repeat myself some,
Mm,
which isn't always the best move. And then also like the when you're preaching multiple services, which I think when we start out over there, we're going to try to do more than one service. So sometimes you'll really like the way you said something in the first
and you're
service,
like,
and then
shoot,
and then
what did I say?
and then you get in the second service and you try to find
No, it's just not there.
it, and you're
It's
like,
off. It's gone.
and you spend some mental anxiety trying to find that phraseology, and so when you transcribe, it's just kind of all there for you. So I've learned to lean on that. I do have points and these are maybe the points you're talking about in my transcript that are just kind of bracketed where I just give myself the freedom to kind of launch off and do some of that. And I do recognize the connection that comes with those points in the sermon and probably need to do more of it. So.
Well, one of the things that I do is because, on my website, I think I have 8 or 9 different talks that I could give up and give this
Mhm.
evening, right? On a
Mhm.
myriad of topics, from destroying pro-abortion arguments to why Jesus was a godly and manly man, having a foxhole, like all the things, right? And I can adjust those up or down based on my time limit. And so like, even like this weekend, as of this recording, I have back-to-back speeches on back-to-back days. The first one is an hour plus, and the second one is 35 minutes, but they want the same subject.
Mm.
And so it's like, okay, how do you,
Yeah.
put all that in the right window? Because again, if I'm, kicking off this men's event, there's 2 other speakers coming after me. I'm not going to be the guy that goes into overtime because I felt a move of the spirit and all of
Yeah.
that, and then jack up everybody's calendar and schedule. I've been on the back end of some events like that where the guy that was supposed to, transition into me was supposed to talk for 10 to 15 minutes and talk for 45. And
Mhm.
I'm in the back pacing like a lion, just like ready to either devour him or everybody in the room. And I was just like, let me up there. And I knew that, the guys can only pay attention so much. But like my point being is, like, the reason why I flow is because of the prayer that I say to myself before I start recording on the show or before I walk out in front of a group of people. And, it's a derivative of what, Joby says when he goes into the deer blind to write his sermon for that week. And it's like, hey, they're not my sheep, they're your sheep.
Mhm.
They're not my people, they're your people. What do you want me to tell your flock this week? And I do the same thing before I go up there and speak. And I have a lot of play in my
Mhm.
notes, right?
Mhm.
There's stuff I got to hit word for word, then there's a lot of play. And so even if I'm doing something 2 times in the same day, that prayer of what do you want this flock to hear? My assumption is that if there's difference between the two, of which there will be different examples, like different emphasis, is that God put that in there, the Holy Spirit put that in there, and there's some level of guidance. Somebody or some group of somebody's in this room needed to hear it that way or
Yeah.
needed to hear something else. and I was just the conduit, and more than likely I'm never going to know that that connection was made for that person, but I just did like my part as the cog in the wheel. And also, I promised that I would do this to you back in the day, and it hasn't happened yet because I'm still looking for the right time. As you're walking up onto stage,
I think about it every time I preach. My head's on a swivel. Where's Kyle? Where's Kyle?
And it's going to be at that moment where they are closing out the song. You got to take those 3 steps up onto the stage and ready to go. I'm going to snatch your transcript, and you won't be able to catch me, baby. It's not going to happen. And you can't go get your notes. You can't be like, hold on, I need to go back to my printer. You're just going to have to preach it, baby.
Okay.
And maybe that'll be the time where it's like, oh, this is all right. Like this wasn't as bad as it felt like it was going to be. But even just the fact that you're thinking about it makes me happy.
Oh,
that
sure.
The threat of
you live rent-free on a Sunday morning inside my head.
A lot of people's heads. And that's part of the problem of what we're doing here. But hey, we're winding to a close. I really appreciate you going into all this detail. But you've been living rent-free in my brain for the last several months on one very specific topic. Because here I was on the forging table, minding my own business, right? You know, you're sitting right there. I'm right here. I forget who all was here. I think it was Ryan Horn. And do we know who else was over with us?
It was either Eric or Adam. I think it was Adam.
Okay. So we'll say Adam. And then I say something. I threw out a phrase that I've thrown out before.
Yes.
And you just immediately put me under church discipline because I said, well, I go blah, 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 blah. And you know what? That begs the question, blah, blah, blah. And you interrupt me and you go, actually, no, that's not what begs the question means. What you're doing is leading to a question, doesn't beg the question.
Raises the question, doesn't beg the question.
And I was like, I'm like, first of all, are you the captain now? Did you just like Somali pirate the show, first of all? And then no one else really knew what to do, but they knew it was funny somehow. And so, like, again, I was put under church discipline by an elder of the church live on my own show, didn't edit it out. So I wanted the people to kind of get there. And since then, every time I want to say begs the question on my show, I don't say that. I say,
Pause.
You know, it raises this question. It
I love it. Mission
question.
accomplished.
No, but here's the thing. I don't know when it's proper to use begs the question. So I think all that begs the question, Jay. When is it proper to say, like, I need a better example?
It's when you're accusing in an apologetic argument. Typically, it's when you're accusing someone of begging the question, using a circular argument. They're begging the question. It's an accusation. You're begging the question. So
okay, so let's do an example. Let's role play here because, like, I still
the Bible is the Word of God because it says it is the Word of God. That's begging the question.
Okay, and so, like, if I were to say, like, hey, well, that actually begs the question. That's never a proper way of using it.
I think it's become
because isn't that just circular reasoning?
I think it's become colloquial enough to use without much
apparently
much of an issue.
Because you couldn't sit on your hands for 2 seconds and just let me say it.
There are certain little pet peeves that I just have, and that's one of them. So it's just my subtle way of being high and mighty. I need to apologize.
Yeah, obviously it's like, gosh, like somebody went to Oxford, has read a little bit too much C.S. Lewis, but okay, I don't know that I'm any clearer on that, but I just know that I'm never going to say it again. And so
mission accomplished.
The rent-free thing is working in both directions, but that's all for me. Anything else you want to get off your chest?
No, man. Appreciate you so much, and your ministry is just it's just awesome. I was nervous today because I'm like, I can't match Thompson's energy, like his pace, his vocabulary, blah, 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 blah.
Weird.
And so, appreciate your graciousness and just having me on.
Thanks again for coming on.
Yep, you bet.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming, www.Undaunted.Life. The music on this podcast is the song Conqueror by the Christian metal band Void Awaken. Be sure to stream their music on Spotify, Apple Music, and wherever else you get your music. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.